We didn't get that part. Okay, so we'll begin. So thank you everyone for coming today. I'm really looking forward to all the questions. And so now we'll just take a few moments to really just connect with each other, with our hearts, and in the space that we're in, the cohesiveness. And so I invite you now to bring all of your attention and your awareness to your breath. And you can close your eyes as you do this. It helps to anchor in that connection. And as you bring your attention and your awareness to your breath, just let the breath do what it wants to do. Let it move freely into your body and out of your body. And as this breath is moving, understand that this is the bridge to your ability to manifest on this plane within your precious vehicle, your body. And it's almost as if we're creators yet humble servants to the light. So I invite you to really feel the power of who you are, the eternal light that forever shines. And your only job truly is to shine, to be present. And anything that's discordant or causing you to react in any way, it's asking you to send that light, that compassion, the forgiveness, mercy, and focus on the peace and the joy that's so special at this time as the days get shorter in the Northern Hemisphere. And very soon we'll be welcoming even more light. So take one final deep breath in. Anchor this short, brief message into your heart and into your field. And I'm placing my hands on my heart to connect with each and every one of you. And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you, Tracy. So welcome again. We were chatting a little bit before we started recording there, but for people who are just going to come into the recording after the meditation, a big welcome to everybody. Remember, there's no time or space, so you're with us in the now. And so with these sessions are really informal. I really just want, it's a time for us to get together, to be together, to raise questions around the work or around things you're experiencing through the ascension journey in different ways. And it's really just time I love making available for us to get together in this way. So it's really not an orchestra organized kind of a presentation or event. It's really just time to be together and ask questions. We have some questions that were submitted, and so we'll kind of go through the questions, but I'm sure as we go along, there'll be questions that surface. And so just make a note of the questions, and we'll get people to kind of chime in and ask questions and share experiences openly with the group. How are people doing in their practice with their sessions? Have people been having some interesting experiences? Lots of anybody want to share? Steve, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll share one that was fascinating to me at doing a session, and I don't remember now. It was several months ago, but at some point during the session, I had this incredible sensation. It felt like a hole opened up in my left wrist, and all this energy just flew out of it. And I think it was actually a big release that I was experiencing for some stuff that was going on then, but it may have also been for the client, or it may have just been for the client. But I actually, in the middle of the session, I said out loud, "Whoa," because it was so real. It was so physical. And I felt that in my wrist for a week afterwards. And I'm an acupuncturist, and it was right at heart 7, the acupuncture point heart 7, which I needle all the time for helping people with emotional stuff. And it was just, I'll never forget. It was just such a wonderful and unusual experience, and I just loved it.
Well, that's amazing.
Very appreciative. Yeah.
Especially, the energetic anatomy, so you can even correlate precisely.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you,
Thanks.
Steve. Any others with interesting experiences or peculiar experiences? Anything you want to share? You could just open your mouth. Hi, Lamar.
Hey, yeah, Morley and I were just talking to a very, very dear friend of ours who we've known for about 12 years. We didn't realize until recently that he was kind of connected to these types of things as well.
Okay.
And after a while, he was really struggling just energetically with stuff. And I made a comment to him one day that the work that we do is actually helping people deal with that. And I didn't think he would ever actually work with us. And he reached out a couple of days later and he said, "I would really like to do sessions with you." The interesting thing with him, he has a lot of history, a lot of traumatic events that have happened to him. And what was surprising is, and I can't remember if it was the second session or the third session, that we finished and he sat up and he said, "Did you see the woman that was in the room? Did you see the woman? She was in the room and she was taking stuff and she was telling you to get out of the way because she had to get this junk out of here." And he's still talking, and this has been probably 3 or 4 months ago, and he still talks about it all the time.
Really?
And it was just this massive experience that whatever was being taken out of the room, and there was a woman in there helping take care of it. And he said, "I could literally picture her standing next to you." And it was just shocking at how strongly he reacted to it and how much he shifted since that all happened.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It was a very cool experience.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Anybody else have a story they want to share, or comments, experiences? Feel free, no pressure, just feel free. Deb, yes. Please.
Yeah, occasionally, as I'm doing a session with someone, I start to see like them in what might be a past life, or they're in that old clothing, or tunics and that kind of stuff, and that seems to be a little bit of an energetic shift as I'm working. And Steve, I hope you don't mind if I mention this from the last sessions. We've been kind of been sharing. How do you feel about slight deviations from the procedure? Because when I was working with Steve, the soul star chakra and the earth star chakra really wanted to be included in the chakra charging and clearing. And
okay.
So I just wondered.
Yeah, there's no harm in doing that to expand it. It's important to always do the baseline like the baseline, it's not a procedure, it's the technique to kind of go through all the actual modality, the way it kind of is. But the chakra system does expand. And it's interesting you say that, because there are times when I'm doing sessions that I will actually charge the soul star and the earth star chakras as well. So you're just tuning into that. So it's actually kind of an expansion, I guess, of the work, especially as people's energetic anatomy evolves. So no issue with that at all, then.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. So welcome to those who joined. Chinsim, I got your message there that you had to reboot. We're glad you're back. And Mewa too, I see you've joined. So that's great. And so we started about 5 or 10 minutes ago. We've started recording. So we'll send the recording out to everybody so you guys can catch up with anything from earlier. Any other comments before we kind of move on to questions? Any experiences people want to share? Have you seen some nice evolution in your clients, their healing, their release work around things they've been carrying, these kinds of things? Have you guys had a chance to be putting it into practice a little bit?
Yes, I'm just blown away each time about the experience of the people that receive, those healing sessions. I saw them becoming more anchored, more aligned, more focused, more balanced. Someone told me she felt she was reborn. And it's just amazing how I see the progress of them. Like, it's quick for them to become much more connected to who they are and have much more, what's the word, maybe sovereignty or, confidence, trust in themselves to move forward, to make decisions, to put, boundaries in place. So it's just amazing.
Well, that's awesome, Shanta. Yeah, it's interesting because people who receive the sessions, the energy work, when we do it, it's kind of a process. But as you've come to understand in doing the work, it's an anchoring. Like, it's bridging an energetic connection between the higher dimensional self and the very earthly part of ourself, and the energy channel that runs between those two spaces, to the point where, in essence, what we're all doing is we're learning to integrate the higher dimensional energies. But it starts by creating an opening and then letting the energy kind of come in. But as soon as we begin to experience that in a more conscious way, I guess is the right way to say it, the energy, it really opens that portal. It really opens the space for that energy to really come in. So people notice how quick it is for them to recenter, how quick it is to ground again, or to feel that inner presence, sometimes for the first time in their lives. And you can see how that's a catalyst for healing, because as people really begin to make that connection in their meditation, in their personal healing time, in the work they do with others, that energy opening expands. And so they're always being flooded with the energy from that dimension, if you will, or the light that comes from that dimension. So in one way, it's a healing, it's a catalysis for healing, but it's also an ongoing process. It keeps on giving, I guess. It keeps on expanding and opening. And I think you described it really beautifully in your work. Thank you, Chantal. Any other comments before we move on? Questions? Everybody good? You can pipe in at any time. So you can just raise your hand too. The reactions down below, if you want to raise your hand anywhere along the way, we'll kind of stop and answer questions. So I switch over for a sec here to some of the questions that we did receive. So we kind of, Tracy organized the questions kind of into categories. And so the first questions that people submitted were more about technique oriented things. So how many days are optimum between sessions, and how long does a session affect a client? So when I teach the training program, I'll often say a week is kind of a good number to work with. Like, you do session 1, you give it at least a good week, and then session 2, and then a week, session 3. It's not a hard and fast rule. And there's times when you'll do them quicker than that. And there's times when you'll space them out more than that. And you can really trust your intuition to kind of guide that process. But if we kind of have to get rule oriented around it and say, this is what we should do, I would say at least a week between the sessions. And the only reason for that, it's not that there's any danger in doing them faster. It's just, this is a real energetic process, as you all have experienced and you all know, both from your own personal experiences, but then also working with clients. And so you want the body to have time to catch up. And by the body, I mean all elements of the body: the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and the soul's integration into the body. All of those things create profound and impactful experiences for people. And we all need time to process that. Sometimes when we do this work with someone, it's the first time they will have ever felt a spiritual energy in a conscious way in their life. And just that experience is profound. Like, if nothing else came out of the session, just to have that and know that as an experience is a very profound thing. But it has a big impact on consciousness. Imagine if you're kind of floating along in your life and you weren't really sure if spiritual things were real or energy was real, and all of a sudden, boom, it's life-changing. It's something that is a complete decrystallization of a thought form, and you have to integrate that into your belief system now, because before that point in time, you didn't know that, and now you do. Then that's just an example. Now, many people, of course, are very spiritually seasoned, and they have had meditative experiences and visionary experiences and these kinds of things. So it's not that kind of stuff. They've already walked through those doorways, I guess, those doorways of consciousness awakening. But they'll start having even more profound experiences on an inner plane and on a sensitive plane. And so each one of those has to be processed. When we start releasing things, people go through a period of disidentification. So, for example, if you're releasing energy patterns that have been printed and impacting a person their whole life, and all of a sudden the energy behind that, like the voice behind that was creating that all the time, is dissolved. It's almost like you don't know yourself. It's like, I don't feel the same way, but I don't know how I feel. Like, it's almost like I don't know myself, kind of a sensation. Not exactly, I'm being a little bit dramatic, but I think you can appreciate what I'm saying. There's a sense of not really identifying with the old and trying to become comfortable with the new. So there's many levels at which energy work has an impact on people. And then the other level is just healing reactions, just going through the process of energy in the body, working through the kinks and the contractures and the things that have been part of the energy field that have been holding the person in a posture or in a certain energy space. And, the body wants to clear out those energies and begin releasing those energies so the body can recalibrate. And so there's a process of that as well. So this is why I say, there's no specific time frame, because a lot of it will depend kind of on what the person you're working with is living through the process. If someone's going through deep healing responses, I would slow it down. I would, say, well, let's wait another week and we'll do session 2, kind of a thing. And if someone just zooms through it and they feel like, this is just all good and I'm on top of the world, you could perhaps go a little faster. And so you can kind of tailor that to the experience of the person you're with. And stay in touch with people as they go through those experiences, because they'll want to reach out. They may have questions, they may have things they're living, and they just kind of want to run it by you or share it so that they know they're not going crazy, or they know that what's happening is not scary, or it's a good thing, even if it doesn't always feel good in the moment. Those kinds of things that we all go through healing reactions. And so about a week is the answer, but it can be longer, it can be shorter. If someone does go through the sessions quicker than that, I always tell them to leave themselves a space to process the experiences on the other side. So don't do all 3 sessions in a weekend and think you're going to go back to work on Monday and everything is going to be normal and all that kind of stuff. Give yourself a little space, a little more time than you normally would to have personal time. Time to be alone, time to be in nature, time to take care of yourself, take baths if you're having soreness and things in the body, all that kind of stuff. Just real good personal care through the integration. And so, if you're going to do them fast, let people know that may be part of it. But it's not limited to doing it fast. People are going to have some of those kinds of experiences anyway. I don't tend to talk too much about them, only because you don't really want to program people to have bad reactions. I kind of let the reactions speak for themselves. And then when people are dealing with things, I'll talk about them. But I don't tend to say to people, you're going to live this, or you're going to live that, or you're going to specifically live this or that. I'll often say, these are the kinds of things that some people experience. Not everybody does, but you may, and not to be worried if you do. Just let me know what you're experiencing and we'll talk through it. And so that's kind of a nice way to open a space for it, but not to make people feel like they have to have that experience or what have you. The mind's very powerful, and we can kind of program it to do things, if we're too strong-minded, I guess. So that's the kind of time frame. It would be a week between session 1, session 2. When you get to session 3, the time frame really has to be gauged based on the response to the healing session. So remember, session 3, we're bringing an intention into the session. It's usually focused around a very specific, either physical, emotional, or psychological aspect of reality. And there's a healing integration that takes place. And people will often want to move forward to repeat session 3 a second time, or to add a layer to session 3 by bringing a new intention into the experience. And so depending on how they process the first session 3, you would gauge the second session 3 in that way. A lot of people say they'll often bring the most important thing they're living at this point in time forward for session 3. And they may want to repeat the energy session just to really reinforce it and make sure the energy is going to get in there and do the work. And so it's okay to do that. It really is. There's no problem at all in doing that. But then other people will say, well, I feel like I had a release around it, but there's still something holding me back, or there's still something I'm experiencing. So we'll talk a little bit to kind of fish out an intention, or just the intention can be to go a layer deeper into the intention. And that's a nice way, I guess, of saying it. If you just kind of want to handle it, but you're not quite sure what the blockage is or the intention is. Remember, the energy is always listening, and it knows what the intention is, even when we sometimes don't have the words for it. Like we may feel a certain way, or we may be experiencing something, and we kind of have an idea around what we're living and what the intention should be for healing. But the energy responds in a real full way, understanding what's creating that experience in a person's world or a person's reality, even if it's from another lifetime and these kinds of things. The energy can kind of respond to help clear and open up spaces in that way. So it's a complicated answer. So if we were really going to go say, like, we needed a physical answer, I'd say try to space it at least a week between sessions. But I really want you to use your intuition as practitioners and kind of get into the practice of really feeling it out and trusting what you're receiving and guiding the follow-up sessions in that way. And so not to be hyper logical about it, to be a little bit more sentient about it, and to really respond. If you feel it's best we wait a week or two, then just trust that, and it'll be okay. Remember, the energy is programmed in such a way that we can't do harm. You cannot hurt anybody by doing this work. And sometimes the energy will not respond in the way we think if a person is believing they want to do something, but there's something in them that's refusing it at the same time. And so it's always honoring the free will of an individual. And so, or also the soul's directive for an individual. So say, for example, a person is living something and they want it to go away, but their soul wants them to live something by living it. The energy work will honor that, because it's part of the soul's trajectory. It's part of what the soul is hoping to achieve. Does that make sense to everybody? So sometimes you might feel, well, it's not going away, or maybe the healing isn't working, but it's really because the energy is listening and it understands the fuller spectrum of what the person needs to experience. And so it'll always respond with that respect, with that dignity. It really is from the soul that all that comes. And so we kind of just have to honor that. And when we move into the space of listening in that way, we'll kind of get a sense of when it's the right time to do the next session. So if you get no clue and you really don't know, never more than a week, always at least a week between sessions. But if you really stop and listen, you'll see exactly what I'm saying. You'll kind of get a sense like, let's just slow this down a bit, or let's wait a week or two, and then you can carry forward if that's the case. Or somebody, you'll talk to them and say, I could do both sessions in this next 2 days. It's no problem. You may get that sense as well. So just kind of go with that if that's okay. All right. Did I confuse or clarify? How long does a session affect each client? So this can be an interesting experience because I've had everything from a session kind of doing its work within a week to a session still working a year or two later. So it's interesting because the energy will continue to work with the person, moving them forward. And there may be elements of life that are part of that journey, and it will take longer in terms of what we perceive as time for the healing to move forward in different ways. But like I've had people who said things to me like, I did a healing session with you 2 years ago, and I just realized this week the impact it had on my life. And so, when you hear things like that, you realize the energy it's so much wiser than any of us can possibly be with a human brain. It sees and knows all things. It knows how to respond to things in a really respectful, spiritually mature, full way. And so it will do for the person what serves their highest good always, and it will do it in a time frame that honors the journey. And so we have to lose any attachment to time or response because we don't always understand from our human perspective the nature of that deeper healing process. And that's a really hard thing to get used to. Like we are all solutions oriented kind of beings as human beings. And so we kind of want to do something and see the outcome of it in a really short time frame or in a really visible way. And sometimes with healing, you're long forgotten by the time the healing is actually working. So I always tease people, I say my clinical work was in radiology. And so as a radiologist, you're the one in the background doing all the hard work. You're reading the scans, you're making the diagnosis, you're figuring out if things are better, if they're not. And you produce reports that go to the person's physician, and then they talk to the patient. And so the patient is talking to their doctor thinking they've figured all this out, and they don't realize there's a radiologist or something else in the background that's really bringing it all to light. So I always say to radiologists, you have to be super humble because you really don't get a lot of credit for anything you do. You're doing it all invisibly in the background. And as energy healers, it's a little bit like that too. There's sometimes you're doing work for people and people will really see, feel, know, and appreciate the changes they're living, and they'll share that with you. So there's a tremendous beauty in that. And, it's really hard expanding to have those experiences with clients and stuff. But sometimes it's long after you're forgotten, or it's a transient encounter with a person and they're well into the next phase of their reality and you were part of another one. So they may not even put 2 and 2 together or realize that, the healing they're living was really part of that encounter. And so it's okay like that. So just be at peace in your heart, knowing that that's the way it works. The next question we have here is, do I need to focus on sending my energy to the client in each position, or are the Syrians doing the sending? So when you're doing the work, you're never sending your energy. It's not that you're sending your personal energy to the client. You're in a space where you're open to receiving energy that may flow through you. And so the Syrians will contribute to that. There are other beings that work in the healing sessions. I'm sure those of you who have clairvoyance, you see people or see beings in your work or hear clairaudiently. It's not limited to the Syrians, the guides for the person you're working with, your guides, angelic beings may come in and be part of the healing reaction. There are other, spiritual entities that may come and be part of the healing process. The Syrians are kind of like the guides, they're kind of like governing and helping and organizing, I guess, and participating in the healing. But we're not even limited to that engagement. There's all kinds of other forces of energy that can come in a healing way. And so the Syrians are more like the gatekeepers of all that, or like kind of the spiritual physicians, they're kind of governing the healing process, and then they may participate in the healing. So sometimes people who are really open, they'll have experiences of feeling the Syrians working on them, or seeing some kind of a blue being or light being or different things, and they'll recognize them. And but then other times you'll recognize it as different forces. It's not uncommon for an angelic light to come into the healing session and to participate in it as well. And so coming back to the question, you're never sending your energy. You're in a space where you're opening to the quantum energetic space. And in that space, energy will sometimes flow through you and flow to the person you're working with. Sometimes it will flow in you and vibrate you, and you'll feel like you're vibrating, and that energy is radiating through your system. And so sometimes it'll be a direct transfer of energy. Sometimes it's more like a singing of energy, if you see the difference between the two. But you're always being supported by higher spiritual forces in that. So when that energy flows through you, it's not taking of your energy. It's using you as a vector or as an anchor point for the energy to kind of flow into the 3D world. So never your energy, ever. And that's why you can kind of walk away from a session untouched, in essence, because it's not going to deplete your energy to do the work. But when you're working with higher dimensional energies, that itself has an impact on the body. So you'll feel sometimes super energized after the session, but then you may need to take time. You feel like, I just need to take time to kind of like take a break and settle down, or, just meditate and let my own energy rebalance. But it's because of the interface with the higher dimensional energies. It's not because it's draining or taking from your energy. Does that make sense to everybody? Follow? Good. How effective is it in working with bony misalignment, scar tissue buildup, and organ healing? So all of these kinds of issues are physically integrated issues. So if we have an organ issue, if we're having scar tissue buildup, if we're having bony malalignments, these are physical manifestations of energetic patterns. And so it will always take more time for physical things versus, say, emotional things or mental things, because it's so anchored and concretized in the world. Like, it's really manifested now at the physical level. It's easy to change your mind or change an emotion. It's a lot harder to change your body. So it's the same, like after New Year's, everybody gets excited and they want to get into an exercise program, and mentally it's quick to get into the loop, and emotionally you can get all kind of stoked about it. But to physically manifest it and then see changes in the physical form takes time. And so healing can be, it's a correlation, I guess, between that kind of thinking and healing. For things to work into the physical body, of course, it takes time. And so, and we're also working against, the body is on a program clock. Like the body, the way the genetics in the body works is we are actually programmed to age. The reason we age is because it's part of the way genetics works. Like there are telomeres that shorten, and they shorten to kind of govern the lifespan. So the genetic force of a person can be weakened as we age. And so if you're working with someone very young, it can be easier to bring healing than it is if we're working with someone who's older, because we're also kind of reversing aging at the same time as we are working with the disease. And so there's lots of variables that come into the picture. And so there's not a pat answer that says it will always be this, it'll always be that time frame. but understand it'll always take longer than some of the other kinds of healings that can take place. And what people will start to notice at the beginning with physical things is they will feel the body begin to loosen. They'll feel the body, like if it's really been contractured and tight, they'll start to feel like they had a freedom in the body that they didn't have before. And so they'll feel like they can just breathe bigger, or that they can stretch their arms in a way that was harder before. And all of these kinds of experiences are indications that the energy is working into the physical. And the other thing we can do is we can work with the physical to bring the energy in. So if people are really, really dealing with deep physical things, I would encourage them to do breathing exercises, to do gentle stretching exercises, because they're all things that will help decontracture the body. Okay. If our body has been so wound up and there's tension or illness that's patterned or created strictures, just by breathing into the etheric body, we're bringing life force into the meridians, into the energy. And the breath can bring the energy in and begin to expand the etheric energy field. And as that loosens up, the physical body will react in kind. Does everybody follow that? Like then you'll start to feel more flexible, a little bit more able to move and breathe and bend. So when you're working with those kinds of things, it's important to have the person do things that support the anchoring of the energy in the physical world. So I'd encourage you to have them doing breathing, gentle stretching, maybe Tai Chi or like a gentle stretching kind of a yoga, things that are really going to help the body receive the energy and those kinds of changes. So here's one. I love to keep the sound of Dr. John in my ears during the session. First, is that a detriment to the session? The people who knew me had no problem. However, a woman complained behind my back to another practitioner. Oh gosh, this shook me to my core, and I shut down doing sessions for a little while. It's only in the last month that I started having sessions, but now with headphones on, I know the Syrians are working through us as practitioners. So if you're working with clients and you're going to use the audio guidance, I would always recommend doing it in headphones. When the person's on the table, they'll end up wanting to listen. So a lot of people will enjoy that, or they'll think it's kind of fun or what have you. But it's nicer to let the person on the table deeply relax. Like they don't have to worry about following directions or anything. And so if you listen to the guidance just in a headset, you can put earphones in and kind of you can hear the voice guiding you in the process that way. It's probably a better way to do it. Don't be disheartened by that. I mean, people will always have experiences. They'll be disappointed by things. They'll have expectations that are not met or this kind of stuff. And people will react in funny ways. It's a very difficult time on planet Earth. You go out and you face people in the world and they're all crazy. I'm sorry, but they are. And so just know it's like that. And people have all kinds of funny reactions and things. And just see it through the eyes of compassion. Just kind of go back to your own buddhic nature and realize the person's tormented by something, they're agitated by something, they're wounded by something, they're upset by something. Just move back into that centered space and just be in a loving presence and a loving radiation and do your best to kind of be in the world in that way. I know it's easier to say than it is to do, but we're all in the same boat, right? And so, but when it's personal, when these attacks are personal, or someone does things that are really so hyper personal, it's so hard for us as sensitives to kind of let that wash over us. We have to process it. It's kind of like you have to stop with it, let yourself feel the way you do, go through the process of realize, you can be logical with yourself and say, they would only do that if they're suffering or hurting or frustrated. Is there something in it for me I can learn? And if so, I'll take my lesson. And if not, I'll just gracefully bow out of this conflict and carry on with my world. And so, but in a case like this, I would say with the audio, for that reason, it's probably best just to do it with headphones, unless the person says to you, oh, if you have those audios, play them. I'm certainly not averse to it, but I would encourage people as a rule of thumb kind of thing to do it in that way. A client received all 3 sessions and they came back in about a month for a routine healing. When this happens, more often than not, I'm guided to give them another UFH3 session. Why would that be? So the answer to this is the layer of wounds. So in our Akashic energy, we have a multiplicity of experiences and patterns, emotional patterns that are in there. We've all had experiences that created different energetic or emotional wounds or memory-based wounds in our Akashic energy. And so as people start to heal, they'll release a layer, and then that will create a transformation. But then there'll be another layer. And it's because the kind of healing we're doing through the ascension process is so deep and so profoundly transformative that it's kind of like turning someone from an old energy human being into a new energy human being, if you will. Like there's a huge, big transformation that we're all making to do that. And so we go from a world where we're all used to relating to each other as humans to this world where we're kind of in the world, but not of the world, like living in a different way in the world. And so it's a person who's integrated in their energy, who's able to understand the nature of duality and 3D reality, who's able to kind of bear the brunt of the 3D world, but not get caught up in the maelstrom of the 3D world. And so wherever we have wounds that would pull us back into that 3D world, they surface. And we all have lots of them, myself included, because we've all lived many lifetimes. We've all been through so much. And so through that time, we will have within our own Akashic energy layers. And so it's done in layers. The healing happens in layers. And from my perspective, I think it's because it would be overwhelming for it to be any other way. Imagine if you went today from being, Chantal or Jill or Emily or Chin Sim, just this person who you don't even recognize because of your stellar and light nature, and you're here in the world shining your starlight all over the place. It's a big transition to make. So it happens in layers so that you can kind of take it a step at a time, recognize the nature of your healing, do the healing integration of things that might be part of it from your soul's perspective or your soul's journey. All that kind of stuff weaves into the story. Does that make sense, everybody? So when clients are coming, they're going to do their healing in layers too. No one's going to come in and leave utterly, completely transformed and just in their own Christic presence 100% of the time, all the time. So they're going to go through a layer towards that or a step on the journey towards it. And so when they will come back for another healing session, the focus will shift to another layer. And so that may be more or less conscious to the person. It may be as straightforward as knowing it's to do another healing session, or you may have a very specific awareness of what the session is focused on. Or, someone may say something like, I feel so much calmer. I feel like that anxiety I was feeling is kind of settled down and I feel a little bit more centered in myself. But now I feel like my mind is all over the place and I can't relax and blah, 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 blah. So they'll kind of see another manifestation of an energy that creates distortion. And so they may tell you, what it turned into. This used to be my problem, but now this has become my problem. And so you'll kind of know where the energy is going when someone says something like that. And so the energy will always kind of listen and respond to the next layer in the onion. And it really is like an onion when we're healing. Does that make sense to everybody? And so that's the reason that happens that way and why you'll do another session. So here's the question about client experiences and follow up. A few weeks ago, I met with a client for a check-in and a session 3 repeat. I hadn't met with her for 6 months and her well-being had improved much since my last visit. However, when I met her on this day, she was teary, feeling depressed and thinking she would need to get antidepressants. We had talked for some time before healing and using breathing tools. At the start of the healing, she was slow to relax and settle. And during the chakra clearing, she heard her phone vibrate. She asked me to get her phone, your secretary and a healer, so that she could check it. She was concerned the message may have to do with her son, but it wasn't. While I continued with the healing process, I wondered what effect an interruption would have on the healing. Please advise. And then due to time commitments, I had to complete the healing more quickly than usual. It felt a little bit rushed, and is the rush disadvantageous? She felt better afterwards and was grateful. She hasn't gone on antibiotics, but I did encourage a medical check, B12 thyroid, which she arranged. She let me know she's feeling more vital and in a better space, and I will revisit with her next week. So this is it's a beautiful story that explains the healing process so well to me. And so when a person's energy is triggered into healing, energies come up and the person will often feel an immediate release of energy. And then things kind of settle down and they're left in this space where it hasn't fully gone away yet, but they're not quite, they know they feel different than they did at the beginning. So they recognize there's progress, but they're not quite sure where their footing is at this point in time either. And so as you continue to work energetically to support a person in that space, it will walk them through those energies. And so the best thing often to do is just to continue with the energy work and carry on. It's always wise to never assume things are just energy. If you sense something in what a person's telling you that you think might be a medical issue or needs a medical investigation, always recommend it. Always send people for those kinds of diagnostics and things. I've seen energy healers who kind of refuse physical reality sometimes, and they're trying to work energetically to help people heal. And someone has a terrible like vitamin deficiency or hypothyroidism that could be treated medically while they're doing their healing work. Their life could be so much better while they're doing their healing work if you also support them on the physical level with those kinds of things and then walk them through the healing at the same time. So modern medicine and energy healing don't have to be separate worlds. Like sometimes I think people think they can only do one or the other. And you guys, I know, don't necessarily see it that way, which is great. So you can kind of live in both worlds at the same time. And so, but if you sense something like that, that might be medically either diagnosed or supported, it's a great value in doing it. And you'd always should recommend that to your clients. But carry on with the work. Keep doing the healing work. Keep carrying on and bringing it forward. And so this is a good example of what happens as you work through the energy and another layer releases. And when things are really deep and profound in the Akash of a person, this may happen a number of times. You might have to go through this in layers. So you may do healing work, they will improve, and then they will feel like things are getting worse, but you're actually at the next plateau. And so by carrying on with the healing work, you're going to move through the next layer of energy, and that will continue to go forward. Does that make sense to everybody? So you know how they always say the darkest hour is before the dawn? When you're healing, you often tend to feel the worst right before you have the breakthrough. And so if we remember that as a pattern in energy and healing, we'll kind of understand what's happening there. And so if you do the work, you'll see that the energy will continue working for days and weeks after. And so sometimes a session may be shorter, it might be longer. You might really have the space to immerse yourself in it. You kind of lose track of time. And then other times you're on more of a schedule and you're doing the work and you feel it's a little tidier, or your time frame is a little tighter. And so the energy session is never limited to the physical encounter or to the sessional encounter. The energy keeps working long after the session is done. And so the session is kind of an anchor point for it to happen, but it will continue after. And so if you had to end a session quickly, the energy is going to continue to work. So that really won't have an impact. And because of all the spiritual support that is around the work, all those things are supported from that level. So if the Syrian beings, for example, or other light beings that would be working, would stay with the person during the healing process and help to bring it forward in time. And they, spiritual entities understand the reality of the physical world, the limitations, the things we have to deal with as physical beings that they don't have to deal with as spiritual beings. And it's so benevolent and loving and supportive that we can kind of live in this space where we really genuinely know everything will be taken care of that way. And so if a session ends a little abruptly or whatever, no stress, be really at peace in your heart about that. It'll really continue to work. And so a beautiful, beautiful story of a healing journey that's not quite done yet. So that's good. Some questions about the Syrians. Does only one Syrian work with each client in each session? So this is a wonderful question. So no, it's not one Syrian. The Syrians are kind of funny, and I can't pretend to understand the fullness of how reality is in that Syrian space. I can only know what they kind of bring to me and share with me. The first time the Syrians came to me, they came to me as one big ball of light. And so it was like whew, this whole big field of consciousness that kind of came into my meditation. And then to introduce themselves to me, they fanned out. And out of this light emerged light beings, like they were walking out of a fog, you know, like they kind of stepped out of this light field and took the shape of individual life beings. But while they did that, there was this big light field around all of them, and they were all still swimming in the sea of that energy. But I could recognize that they were individuated beings at the same time. And I think it was, when I get these kinds of visions, there's so much specificity about the way things happen. I'm always blown away because like a year later, I might think about something that was part of the vision and realize, oh my gosh, I missed that. That was so important. And this is a good example of that. So they came in a way that showed me, even though they come forward as more than one being, they're all one being. They're like a common consciousness. They live in a space where they really live in a unified space. And so they can come out of that space and do individuated things, but they really live a oneness that's only suggested at I think in the earth world. Like we can conceptualize it, but it's really hard to imagine if the earth really lived as one, like one being. Just think about it. So they live in that space. That's kind of where they live. That's how they are. So they will come forward as individual beings, but they're still working as a group always. And so even if one person comes, they are embodying the energy of their whole. So even if one being comes to work with a person, it's all of them working with the person at the same time. Does that make sense to everybody? And so it's very strange for us to think in these terms, but that's how it is when we're working quantumly or interdimensionally. And so, but sometimes they will come and appear as more than one being with the person on the table. So you might notice there's someone at the foot, someone at the head, you're working at the heart, and you may feel these light presences that kind of individuate to work at different aspects of the energy field. So in a weird way, it's one being, but not one being at the same time. It's many, many beings, but they will all be working in that common oneness. And so, and the magic of it is, as practitioners, we're also part of that oneness. Like we're also in that oneness space. Like it's not them and us, we're one with them in doing the work that we're doing as well. So we're really kind of merging in that one space by doing it. And so, but you will, the 3D kind of answer is there is more than one. And we're not even limited to just the Syrian beings who are kind of behind the work. Like I said before, there'll be guides to the person. There'll be a history, a genetic lineage to the person, of like family, souls in the family of the person that may be part of their healing. There will be guides, angels, Elohimic forces, all these things can come. And sometimes the person's energy from another lifetime shows up. You'll see them in the energy form of what they were like in that lifetime. And that part of their energy is coming forward in the healing session as well. And so that's kind of like another human being who's joining the healing session, because it's the soul's consciousness while they lived in another time frame. But it's the same soul, but it's another aspect of the soul or another experience of the soul. So this gets all really wacky and crazy when we start talking about it, but it's the nature of how it works. So all these things can come into healing sessions. So the answer in technical terms is it's not limited to one at all, but I want you to understand on a much deeper level the oneness of the Syrian consciousness and how that all works too. Question about Lemuria. In the Lemurian time, the Star Mothers gave birth to priests and priestesses. Who were their fathers? Were their fathers priests? And did the fathers live up to 600 years? Wow, this is a specific question. So in the time of Lemuria, this is my understanding of the history of the Earth. The Earth is an evolutionary planet in a solar system, in a galaxy, in a universe. And throughout the universe, there are many solar systems, many planets that are evolved for life to come to take shape or take form in different ways. And so there are all kinds of expression of creator consciousness that come to life through planetary experiences. And the Earth is one. And it's a very important one. It's a very special one because it's a place where souls that have divinity encoded within their genetic being come to understand the nature of creative life. And to do that, we go through this duality experience as a foundational experience. But before our souls go through the duality experience, we manifest in a state of oneness, just like the Syrians demonstrated in the meditation. And so souls who come to be part of the Earth's experience are predestined, if you will, or it's part of the divine plan. You know, you can only say this in really magical words. And so it's part of the divine plan that the souls who come to the Earth to live here are part of this plan. Now, in the big galactic scheme of things, you know, when we go to the big tower where the CEO of galactic organization lives, and they're trying to figure out how the planets are all going to work and stuff, there's kind of a structure or an order to the way planets are designed and their destiny and their future. But if you're making things on a galactic scale, like you're a big galactic creator god, and you're making planets for things to live on, you realize it takes time to do that. Like you're making these planets in space. And so they have, the living conditions have to be arranged. The perfect balance of all the elemental forces have to be set up. And when we look at the history of the Earth, we'll see the Earth is about 4 billion years old. But humans have only really been on it in our current form for 200,000. So 200,000 years of 4 billion years is a drop in the bucket. So humanity actually hasn't been here for most of the Earth's history in its current form. Does that make sense? And so that helps us understand that everything before that was preparation. It was a time for the planet to go through oscillations of balance that allowed it to develop and be built as a planet that could house life. Okay, so we went through volcanic periods and asteroids and all those things and fiery episodes and water planet, and then photosynthesis came onto the scene and plants began to develop so that we could have a cycle that balanced carbon and oxygen and all the things that are necessary as a foundation to support human life. And so all of that was a preparation. Part of that evolution is the evolution of life forms that can begin to take on the genetic divinity. And so there are humanoid beings that start to develop on the planet, but they're not yet seeded with divine consciousness. So it's kind of like the precursor or the life form that's being prepared to become the temple for that divinity. So when the Lemurian time came and the Pleiadian mothers came, what they were really bringing in that experience was connecting the divinity of the DNA with the physical genetic humanoid that was developing on the planet. Does that make sense? It's kind of like we're plugging that in. And so this is when, you know, Greg Braden's work talks about the 24 pairs of chromosomes that all mammals have, but humans only have 23 pairs. Our second chromosome is a fused chromosome. Geneticists have discovered that it really has all the attributes of what used to be 2 chromosomes, but they've merged into one magically about 200,000 years ago. And so when this all started to happen, really what was happening is the physical part of us was being prepared to take on the mantle of the spiritual part of us. And so what we talk about in this work is the 24th chromosome or the spiritual DNA. The Pleiadian mothers brought this energy because they carry this energy, and they began to bear children on the planet that had the genetic overlay of divine DNA. So they brought this to the Earth. And so the children that were born of them carried this divine attribute. And that divine attribute is part of a soul. And so the soul who's connected and born as a child to that mother is a soul who's now part of the earth experience. As the mothers bore children, the children themselves now carried this genetic structure. And so when those mothers had children, they pay it forward. That genetic change goes into the next generation. So their children also carry this divine overlay. And so with time and a few generations of children, eventually the energy kind of becomes part of a community or a whole collective. And so this is, in a strange way, what Lemuria was. And so it was a time when the mothers bore children, and then the mothers of them bore children. And eventually there was a whole humanity that was born, that or developed, that emerged out of that with their own divine DNA connection. Now, back in the day, things were very simple. It was a very nature-based civilization. It wasn't highly technological and intellectual the way that we've kind of emerged the world to be at this point in time. It was a very nature-based reality. People lived as one with the natural environment. They spoke in a language that was very shamanistic in its nature because they understood the forces of nature, and they understood the balance, and they understood the divinity, and they understood all of these things that were part of that original makeup. But that was a seeding. That was just the beginning. So what happens is then all those little souls that kind of are part of that experience are now here on the planet, and they go through reincarnational cycles. And so the reincarnational cycles are the opportunity for those souls to live in this new world and go through the experiences that are part of that. When we go back to the beginning teachings of every religion, they'll always separate the time of light and dark. There's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which was kind of the beginning of humanity. It's a symbolic way of saying it's the experience of walking through the fields of duality and learning how to be in that space of duality and harmonize them within yourself so that you stay aligned and in balance while you walk the journey. And the way that we experience that as human beings is the struggles we all have with light and dark, and all the shades of gray that kind of find their way into that story. So there are things that are, unobtrusively evil, and we recognize them. There are things that are unobtrusively divine and miraculous and beautiful, and we recognize them. And then humanity lives in this space in between where we all have some light, some dark, sometimes the little angel's talking, sometimes the little devil is talking, and we're all going through our experiences trying to navigate our way. And so it's the purpose of the duality experience is to have that encounter, to go through that as a soul and do your own job of integrating light within you. Does that make sense to everybody? So we're at this threshold now where we're going to kind of drop the duality thing. That doesn't mean there won't be a polarity. There will still be a polarity. But as we go into the energy of the new, it's more like the way the Syrians presented themselves to me. Like as a planet, it would be unthinkable that one part of the world is going to go around and kill another part of the world. Like it couldn't even really enter into the consciousness of someone who understands the higher nature of things. Does that make sense? And so as the earth moves into this new space, these are the programs, these are the attributes of energy that we're dropping as we free ourselves to begin to live in this new energetic world. And so it sounds too good to be true, and it sounds miraculous and all that kind of stuff, but it is the very essence of what is happening as we heal and go through this journey. And so it's happening in individual lives, it's happening in societal lives, different countries, different ethnicities, different colors, like all the fractions and aspects of humanity are having these experiences to encounter all of the obstacles to the wisdom of these things. And some of it's wonderful, like huge, big healing things that are obvious and happening. And others are devastating because it creates all the conflicts that hide behind and keep these realities in place. And so it's a time of a big exposure, like everything is getting shown. And then after the period of being shown, we'll begin to dismantle. And as we begin to dismantle, we will begin to rebuild. And as we begin to rebuild, we will build a luminous space, or an ascended kind of a planet. And so, that's not going to happen in a week. It's going to happen over the course of, years, months and years, and even a couple of generations. It will continue because it takes time for a whole humanity or whole civilization, I guess, to go through that kind of transformation. So a very long answer to that, but that's kind of the story of the world. So I hope that adds more clarity than confusion. Are the temples of Lemuria time built on mountaintops? Yes, they are. They were built on the tops of mountains. And in fact, the primary civilization of Lemuria, it wasn't limited to Hawaii, but the primary civilization, or the original, was in Lemuria. It was in what we know today as Hawaii. But at the time, it was very different. The whole landmass of the mountain of Hawaii was elevated. And so the whole top of the mountain stood out of the water. Like now it's recessed, like all of the lava has flowed and created lava flow. But as this happened, the mountain went down. And so as the mountain sunk, what's left on the surface are the islands. It's the peaks on the mountain. But in the day, the whole mountain was raised. And so it was one island. It wasn't like 7 islands or 8 or however many islands are there now. And so these kind of represent the peaks. So the civilizations that were there were really at the peak of the mountain. The civilizations often lived on the coast. So like the communities were, they were fishing communities. They lived on the sea. So they had a lot of the communities actually evolved and developed at the level of the shore where the land and the water met. But the healing temples, the kind of priestly healing temples and the temple of rejuvenation and all these kinds of things were at the top of the mountain. And so that's where the mothers tended to be. It's where the temple of rejuvenation existed. It's where people would come for those kinds of rejuvenatory experiences. People who worked in the temple of rejuvenation lived in the cold environment up at the top of the mountain all the time. So you have memories of that, and you'll know that's part of reality in that space. And so they were at the top of the mountain in essence. Then as the civilization began fanning out and seeding to other parts of the planet, they often did seek islands, and the healing kinds of temples were often at the very top of the mountains as well in other parts of the world, and even during the Atlantean, what we perceive as the Atlantean times. How much we have done the Syrian transmissions, New Human Journey 3, how much percentage of our DNA is active now? And when do you think we can live with light and no food? So the concept of light with no food is what's referred to as a breatharian. It's somebody who lives on energy that's derived from air and interdimensional planes of being. And so there are people who do this today on the planet. They eat very little physical food. They rely entirely on a divine source of energy, or mostly on a divine source of energy to nourish their bodies. I was interested in this a while ago, years ago, but I realized I need to be more anchored in the world. And so I do actually need to be eating because it helps hold the vibration in the physical world. But not everybody does. There are people who are really drawn to doing this and are keen to learn about it. So it's a personal journey. It's something that a person will experience if they choose to, or if they feel aligned to it. It'll be quite some time before the whole planet would live in a space that we're all just living on air, if you will, or living as breatharian in concept. So it won't be probably within the spectrum of this physical incarnation. It would be something that would be well into the future. But there are people who are very drawn to it and do it even in this current day and time. What can our spiritual power animal do for us? Oh my God, these are wonderful questions. I was meditating on a shamanic drumming jaguar era music the other day. In the meditation, a negative response to a situation came to my mind. I thought the negative thoughts should be replaced later by another ceremony meditation, but then I realized it was wiped out directly in the jaguar meditation. How does that work? I've never experienced that kind of thing. So when we work with shamanic forces or spirit animals, spirit helpers, there are helpers that are attributes or elements of consciousness that exist and can be very supportive to us in different ways. When people do shamanic work, they may encounter their spirit animals. And so the animals will help us do things that are inherent in the essence and the energy of their being. So, for example, a shaman is often related to an eagle. So, what does an eagle do? An eagle can fly. An eagle flies, it can fly higher and higher and higher. It can go way above the earth, close to the sun. And from the sun, it can receive divine energy and information and then bring that energy back down to the earth. So when we're working in a spiritual way, the spirit of the eagle helps us transcend energy to rise to that level to receive divine inspiration. So you can see how you're working with a force of nature, an element of nature, an aspect of nature in the form of the eagle, and that eagle embodies the consciousness or the energy to do that. So people will carry totem animals, they'll carry power animals, they'll carry the energy of totem animals that can actually help them do things in a shamanic way. So these animals come into being more in direct shamanic work, because if you're doing shamanic journeys or healing things from a conscious shamanic perspective, these animals will come into the journeys to help you achieve things through the journey principle. Does that make sense to everybody? But they also are with us in different ways. So say, for example, you carry the totem of an eagle, and all of a sudden you receive divine insight and illumination. It's easy to see the correlation between the eagle energy and that moment in time, even if you're not on a shamanic journey, or even if you don't know you carry a power animal of an eagle within your being. So you can kind of see how some people are really unaware of it, but we'll encounter these beings sometimes in our meditation. But that's the essence in a really summary format. They carry attributes, and it's the attributes of the animal that is symbolic, it's meaningful, and it's supportive to us in different ways. What do our diamond light bodies do for us? I don't feel my diamond light body. How does the diamond light body support us in manifesting our higher consciousness on Earth? Well, your diamond light body is the higher consciousness. It's kind of like the energy that's merging with the physical body. And so people use different terms for this. It's expressed in different ways because it will all depend on how someone receives the energy, the consciousness or information through their own meditative experiences, through their own dreams, through their own channeling messages, through these kinds of things. So people will express the same idea in different language. The diamond light body for me is how it shows up, because I see it as a luminous diamond of integrated consciousness, all the facets of experience around the soul that allow it to embody a light and a wisdom of a higher dimension in the physical form. So what the diamond light body will do is it will bring that higher aspect of who we are into the physical world, so it becomes the manifestation of our soul in the world. And this is what was really taught if we deeply understand what Christ taught. Christ came to teach a way of being that was transcendent to the duality world. He always spoke to us in a language that helped us understand there is a spiritual realm from which we come, that we belong to the earth, but we belong to the spirit. And it's the force of this spirit that comes to work with us and ultimately through us to be ambassadors, I guess, of that kind of lighter consciousness in the world. Christ never ever taught to idolize him. He always said, become like it, become like me. I am just an example of what you can become. So that's all distorted in all the ways we know and all the things that are part of that history. But in the meantime, that's the true message of the living Christ. And that's what integrating Christ consciousness is. So diamond consciousness, Christ consciousness, all these things, Buddhic consciousness, they all kind of tie together because it's a being who has manifested a wisdom, a way of being that is transcendent. So that's really what the diamond body does for us, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to everybody? You can nod, I'll see. Good. Since you have a strong clairvoyant ability, are you bothered by things, everything you see? Do you spend time handling unwanted to see things? What's it like to see so much with your third eye? How do you differentiate real energy happening from illusions? Or the third eye does not see illusions? So the third eye can, so this is a great question. Wow, this is a whole day of teaching. So the number, let's reduce this a little bit. Let's forget about vision for a minute and come back to the experience of being sentient. To be a sentient human being, someone who's expanded in energy and consciousness, you're in a world that where all kinds of things are happening. You turn on the news, you see all kinds of stories. You encounter people in your day-to-day life. You have all kinds of encounters. You watch things from a distance. You see people relating and you see all kinds of things. You move into a space and you feel emotions that don't really seem to belong to you, but they're in the room as part of someone's story. And so you're in a space where you're feeling all kinds of things happening. And it's very difficult to be in a world that's not always super harmonized. Like if the world was really harmonious and you were super sensitive that way, it wouldn't matter. But when you're sensitive that way and you're in a world where all kinds of things come at you, it can be very, very challenging. And so you kind of have to learn how to be in energy and give yourself what you need in order to kind of survive in a world like that. And I don't like being too dramatic and feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so sensitive and I kind of always have to deal with the world and all that kind of stuff. I find that kind of thinking just feeds me feeling bad. So I learned a while back, even though it's true, not to focus on it that way, just to realize it's really beautiful to be super sentient because you can feel deeply another person's heart. You can feel deeply a connection with another person. You can have a communication that's so heart to heart. They can feel your love. They can feel your kindness. They can feel the mercy that you embody when you speak. And to have those kinds of experiences is so rich and so deep and so compassionate. On the other hand, if you really just absorb all these feelings around you, it's overwhelming and it can feel almost like you're being bombarded or attacked or all kinds of different things. So I went through a period in my life where I really had to kind of separate. When I was a kid, I didn't understand the difference between feeling something that was mine and feeling something that was someone else's. Like I didn't actually know. Sometimes, like I would say to somebody, I would feel so sad, and they would say, well, why? And I say, well, I don't know. Like I don't know why I feel sad. I just really feel sad. And they say, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm saying, well, I didn't expect it to make sense, but it's the way I'm feeling and I don't know why. Then something may happen to me. Somebody close to me got hurt, or I may lose something that I really liked, and I would feel sad for my own reasons. But then I would know why I feel sad in that moment because I have a story to tell around it. What was really hard was understanding that the sadness in the first case isn't personal. It was like reading sadness. It was like feeling sadness and being connected to it because you're sentient. And the second was experience sadness because it was part of my story or my life. Do you see the difference between the two? And so I had to become aware of feelings that didn't belong to me and being able to say, I register this, but it isn't mine. I register this feeling, but I know it isn't my feeling. So I would respond to it by sending love or by sending healing energy or by sending compassion to what it was that I was feeling. As you mature and you start having life experiences, you realize your sentience comes into play every time you talk to someone. And so you're talking to someone and you think, they're a liar. They're just telling me all kinds of lies. And I know it. And so you're there nodding and smiling, but you know with every cell in your being that what they're telling you is a pile of crap. And so that kind of sentience becomes really beautiful later in life because you see through things. And at first, of course, you can use that. You could manipulate people with that if you wanted to. But it's really just being able to observe it and not buying into it, but also reacting to it in a way where you just feel mercy and dismissiveness towards the energy coming at you. So you let someone tell you their story or whatever, and you say, okay, that's very nice. But in my mind, I'm just blessing them, and I'm not really agree, believing what they say to me, so to speak. And so we all have lived those kinds of things. I'm saying it because I'm explaining it as a personal story, but I know every one of you can relate to this very much in your own life and your own experiences. And so as you kind of go forward, you begin to learn to use your sentience to read the room, to be able to understand the energetic happenstance around you. Or if you work in a healing context, you can sometimes feel a person better than they can even feel themselves. And so originally, when I first started doing a lot of counseling work, like the clients that I work with would often say to me, how is it that you know what I'm feeling when I don't even know? They would say things like that. And it's like, well, I'm just feeling, I'm just sharing with you what I'm feeling. But I have words for it, or I'm depersonalized enough from it to know what I'm feeling without all the story and history and all the other stuff that's part of it. And so there's a more of a clarity around it. But that began to help me see how I could feel for others or feel with others, their own experience, their own story, and then to help them untangle it, I guess, or find a way out of some of the energy around that. And so we begin to use this sentient ability in healing work very, very often. So you guys, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean when I say that. And you can nod if you if you can register. So as you start to use the sentience, then you realize the gift it is. But then you also have to realize not everything you feel belongs to you. So then the question becomes, well, how do you handle living in a world where it's coming at you anyway, or where you're really sensitive like that and you really feel it? I find what I need to do is I need to give myself personal time every day for balance. So I find there's days I do not want to go in large groups of people. There's days I don't want to be part of something busy and, really public and all that kind of stuff. And I give myself permission to do what I need to do to stay in balance. Or if I do need to do that, say you're traveling and you're going to be in a really public place and that kind of stuff, you kind of go through the experience and then you give yourself the opportunity on the other side to do what you need to do to harmonize again. So the more sensitive you are, the more you'll find yourself needing to do things like that. Some people are really not sensitive that way. I remember Lee Carroll, someone asked him once, like, you channel Cryon, you must be really like super sensitive and feel it. And Lee says, I am like a stone. He goes, I don't feel anything. I don't see anything. I don't see lights. I don't see energies. I don't feel anything like that at all. But you feel in Lee his morality, you feel in Lee the integrity of his being and all that kind of stuff. But Cryon told him, to play the role you're playing, to do the work you're going to do, to have that kind of sentience would interfere more than it would help you. And so imagine if you're in a public face and people are judging you and criticizing you all the time, and all you feel is all that energy coming at you. It's better not to be aware of that. It's better to kind of like be a little bit tougher and be able to kind of bounce all that back and not be encumbered by it. So not everybody who does healing work is, or, part of the ascension story and all that kind of stuff is super sentient, but healers often are. So if you're not, don't worry about it. It just means what you're doing here is you're designed in a way to do your job. And it's perfect that you're not sentient that way because it serves you. If you are sentient that way, you just have to learn how to take care. You have to do the things to let yourself take care of yourself and to find that balance and harmony again. Okay? Long answer, but I hope a useful one. Let's see. Why through the light of the central sun are we one with the Syrians? Without the sun, we cannot be one. What is the mechanism of this one thing? Okay, this is a great question because it goes back to what I was saying earlier about when the Syrians first came. The Syrians embody a consciousness and they work together as a group from a common space in consciousness. Humanity is an evolving consciousness. We will learn to be in a oneness space, the kind of way the Syrians present themselves to us as we move forward in time. Everything in the end is one. Everything is part of one universal, multi-universal, multi-dimensional creation. And there's a creator behind it all, creator consciousness behind it all. And we're all part of that oneness. So we forget that, we don't know that, we don't understand enough about the galactic way of things or the universal way of things to really appreciate that all the time. but that doesn't mean it isn't true. On the earth, it's the kind of experience that's meant to fractionate in such a way to let us have experiences where we feel that isolation or that non-connection. And so that's what creates duality. And so in this space, it's a little harder to feel that, but we're still part of one. The human family is one family. The light beings that work with us are part of the divine family through the galaxy and through the cosmos. And so we're all part of the same light, the same creator light. We're different faces, we're different attributes, we're different experiencers of the same light. But that life force, the light, the energy, the consciousness that is life itself is one, and we are part of that one. Does that make sense to you? All right. So, but working in groups. So we are looking forward to this afternoon. We didn't have a specific question about working, but noticed in the category about working in groups and are interested in what Dr. John says about the topic. We've wondered if there is a way to work together with clients as two practitioners. So we would love some input or ideas. This is more of a comment or question, but I've noticed a few different scenarios where clients over the last few years seem to come to do the work and move forward. But in those scenarios, it felt like there was also something to finish between the client or the person working with and me. The other scenario is these individuals who continue to come back. The difference is there seems to be a deeper connection to the individual. I don't know how to describe it adequately, but it's almost a knowing that we are here to complete something significant as a family of individuals. I'd be appreciating if Dr. Wright has any information concerning what we're experiencing. So these are really wonderful insights. So when you're working as a practitioner, a couple of different things will happen. You will often magnetically draw clients that have attributes, experiences, healing elements of consciousness that are also interwoven with yours, your story. So for example, you know how, say for example, you see this in simplest way. Say someone has an addiction to alcohol and they begin to address it and they begin to heal it and they begin to stop drinking and all that kind of stuff. And then they really thrive, they really find their power, they bring their soul back into their life and they make decisions around things and they completely realign through the experience. That person will often become really helpful to other people who are drinking. And so the energy, the experience itself will become something that they can share through wisdom and teaching. Now, switch that into a galactic healing paradigm. I remember letting go of attributes of Akashic energy and consciousness. And so clients who come to us individually will often be clients who are walking through similar release patterns or similar energetic releases to things that we may have to experience in our own personal journey as well. So there's an element of that takes place, number one. The other thing is there are soul groups that work together. So is like, for example, as practitioners in this work, you've probably clued into the fact that as a soul, we're really tied together, like we're really connected. And so it draws you to the work, it draws you to the experience, like something has led your little feet onto the path where you have done these kinds of things and we're doing them together, just like we're doing this afternoon, having this conversation. So all very different human beings, but on some level, this essence, this something that ties the group together. So the practitioners is an example of that. And so soul families will often draw together at times when we're going through these kinds of transformations and metamorphoses, because we'll help each other in different ways. We'll be able to support each other in different ways. And so sometimes those people, soul family people, will come as clients as well. And you'll feel a really deep Akashic resonance with them for sure. Absolutely. No doubt. It's almost like they walk through the door and you think you know them, even though you haven't met them yet. That's how deeply it can feel sometimes. And so that's cool. In working together, the kind of the modality, I guess it's kind of set up to work with one person kind of doing the work. But I've had a number of practitioners where one person will sit in the space while the other person is doing it, or they'll share elements of doing the practice work together. And when it comes time to do the intuitive work, both may work on the client. So in settings where you're doing that, there's no reason why it couldn't be done that way at all. it's hard to teach that because it's not something most people are going to be doing because they won't be together to do it together. Everybody's from all over the world. And so we're all in different places. So it probably won't show up that way. But for people who do work with other practitioners or are in couples and things where there are two people doing the work together, you certainly can. And so it's often what people have said, and I did this once. My sister and her husband are both practitioners of this work. And I had my sister do a session on me, and her husband sat in the room, and you could feel the presence, receiving the energy or the treatment, we'll call it, and this support of three souls anchored in the same space doing the work. You could really feel the power of doing it that way. And so that's an example of how it might unfold if you're doing it as two practitioners in the same space. All right. So I think that's the list of questions that came in. So I'll close that out. But I bet that's triggered some more. So let's take some time for questions. So let's do this. We'll get people to raise their hand for questions. Jinsim, I had seen your hand. Did you bring it down? You got your question answered miraculously? No. Okay. So
I still have my question.
Good. All right. Let's have it.
I have a client last week or 2 weeks ago. She came in to do the other modality that I offered. And when I was doing that with her, I felt that unity field healing would really help her as well. So I told her about that. And because she is very religious, she said she's not sure if it's part of Christianity would allow it.
Okay.
So she has to go pray on it. What would you say to people like that?
Okay, good question. So I would say pray away. So I would tell the person every soul must make a conscious alignment with their process. And so someone who's experiencing healing, found themselves in a milieu of alternative healing, they're seeing you as a client who does this kind of healing. There's a reason that's all happened. There's a reason they have found you. There's a reason that experience is occurring. And so the way I would read an experience like that is overcoming some of the restrictions of religiousness is part of the next step of healing. Do you understand? It's why it's part of the entry into the healing. But you can never force another person to do that. We always have to let a person make those steps in their own way, in their own time, in their own space, and through their own understanding. So you've done all the right things by introducing it, laying it on the table, offering it in an open-hearted kind of a way, and honoring the person the space to go reflect on it and think about it. And they may decide not to do that, and you honor that. They may decide they want to do it, and you honor that. And so if they come back and ask after everything that's happened, it's in alignment. They won't do that until they're ready to face that next step in their healing journey. And so you can never push somebody to do that. You always have to kind of make the space for it to happen. So everything you've done is perfectly in alignment, and the person will sit with that and have their own experience and then make a decision. And when they come out of that decision, you just honor simply what they decide. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's great. Chantal.
Yes. Earlier you said that we receive, the energy instead of sending it. Because I have my shoulder broken, I feel I cannot offer, my services right now. But is it possible to give, a fair session if I only use like one arm, one hand? I was, wondering if we have something physical that doesn't work right now.
Yeah.
Are we like legit to offer our service? And maybe the question can also adapt to when we are not feeling well emotionally, I mean, yeah, does it make sense? Do you
100%.
Okay.
100%. So first, we'll deal with the physical first. That one's easy.
Yes.
So the answer is, of course, you can still do the work. And in fact, there's even a benefit in doing the work, because by doing the work, of course, you're in the flow of the healing energy and you're in the experience of it too. So it will help you as well as helping the person you're working with, for sure. So remember, because we can do this work at distance, we can do it through consciousness instead of through direct physical touch. Like we can do a session for someone who's on the other side of the planet. There's times when people are working in space restricted ways. They can't walk around a table, for example, so they can only do parts of the work kind of in the physical, and then they have to carry on through consciousness to do the other side of the table. And so we can do these kind of hybrid treatments like that, where we're working in different ways, or work purely from a perspective of through consciousness by doing a distance session. So what you can do if you have a physical restriction that's either transient or even more permanent, you can always work by accommodating the physical with consciousness inclusion. And so if you're finding you couldn't use your arm to do some of the session, you can use the arm that's still moving right now, or you can take a step back and kind of do it through consciousness and introduce the step in that way. So for sure, you can do the work, absolutely. But don't overdo it. If you're healing and going through experience, find that right balance. In terms of emotional stuff, if I'm in a space where I'm really distraught or upset or chaotic, or there's something going on in my life that I feel like I can't regroup, then I would not want to do a session in that frame of mind. So I would always want to just start. I mean, that doesn't mean you're always as tip top doing every session as you might want to be. Like there's days you'll feel really super aligned and it just is really easy and beautiful. There's other days where there's things happening and but yet you're able to hold your own and kind of do the work and carry forward. If there's really something personal, like you just found out your best friend had a terrible accident or something like that, and you're really distraught and focused and not able to be present and all that kind of stuff, then in a case like that, I would, reschedule. I would just say the timing isn't right. So let's just honor that and cancel it for now, or just delay it or postpone it. So in small ways, as long as you can kind of regroup and get in that centered space as best you can, it's okay to go ahead. But if you're really at your wits, then I would say reschedule.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hi, Sally.
Hi, John. Nice to see you. And
You too.
So I recently, just a couple of days ago, made an offering to my Buddhist community that I would do either readings or unity field healing for people, and the donations would go for the building fund for my center.
Okay.
So I had a couple of people contact me, and the first person I worked on is somebody who's out in British Columbia at the moment, who's dying, and it was very clear, when I was doing the first unity field healing, how ill she was. And she had sort of said to me too, and she's living in isolation on a 200-acre, very remote property. And so she wanted to book me right away again to keep doing the work. She did feel, the Syrians coming through. So I'm just, I'm wondering about your advice around working with somebody who's dying. I have done through my Buddhist practice, like a lot of work around Bardo and transition work, right?
Yeah.
And with people. So in terms of the unity field healing, what advice do you give in terms of working with people remotely who are dying? And because I feel that I should be speeding up the sessions I'm doing with her. I'm going for surgery myself on the 20th. And I said, I'm happy to work with you pre-surgery, post-surgery, and do what I can for her. So I'm just wondering what your advice is in this.
Excellent. Yeah, great questions. So when it comes to healing there's healing, which is kind of the healing that means moving through experiences while we're still in this lifetime. And then there's the kind of healing that's inter-lifetime.
Mhm.
And so, because of the nature of what's happening on the planet now, there are many people who will leave. They'll kind of check out this experience and they will come back. They will reincarnate in a different energy and in a different frame of mind. It's interesting because when my mom was passing, I had kind of it was a semi-lucid dream. It was kind of a strange experience. It was like I woke up and I almost couldn't remember that I had the experience, but I knew I did. It was like I didn't remember the dream, but I kind of did. And it was that she wanted me to do the healing work before she passed away. And I kind of thought, well, that's really strange. Like, why are we doing the sessions if you're going to be leaving? And the answer was for when I come back. And so it really taught me something because it helped me understand that sometimes when we're working energetically with people, it isn't about this lifetime at all. It's about balancing energies that will allow their return to be freer, to be more unencumbered. And so that really blew my mind. And then later I heard Lee Carroll say something in a channel once about people, like some of the light workers would say things to him like, well, I'm too old for this. Like I'm learning all this and now, and I'm like 80 years old. Like, I'm not going to bring this to life in some way in this lifetime. And Lee said, what's happening through the ascension is everything you integrate in this lifetime is immediately with you when you return. And so when people come back who've been working on ascension, who've been working on the transition information and all that kind of stuff, when those kids are born back in new little bodies for the next time around, they're going to come with this full wisdom that has not been part of what life had been before. And you see this in the kids. Like if you have any experience with children, you see these little creatures come back and they're like so plugged in, and they'll have memories of other lifetimes and they'll have all kinds of things going on. So the work is at the level of the soul. It's kind of helping the soul anchor in changes in the 3D realm, that when they return to the 3D realm, it's like they just pick up where they left off. And so a lot of the healing work that we're doing in transition states is really around that. I found it kind of strange because I thought, well, like once you're back in your soul, if you just kind of wanted to liberate yourself from all this and come back in karma free, couldn't you just do that? But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because you have to make some of these transitions in the 3D realm, like they have to be done in the world of form rather than just in the world of spirit and consciousness. So the healing work that we do in transition states, that's how I see it and understand it. So I really encourage people to do it when it seems to be on their path, or when they find themselves, at a crossroads where that's what they're doing specifically with an individual. So I really encourage you to keep up the good work. The other thing is, because the nature of time and other experiences, you can coordinate it in a way that works. And so if you want to do the first 2 sessions kind of in a rapid succession, there's no problem with that. And then if you want to do the 3rd session, you kind of tune into to the person you're working with and see how they're doing on the other end. And then kind of wait for a hunch. You'll get an intuitive hit, whether it's okay to go ahead or not. Remember that the energy work can kind of be done like a seed planting. It's kind of like a session that's done, but it'll continue to work long after the time you've done the session. And so spirit will kind of oversee that. It'll watch over that, I guess is the best way to say it. And it'll help the seed unravel, or help the energetic experience unfold, I guess is a better way of saying it, in a way that is timely for the person and not just limited to when the energy session is being done. So if you speed it up and it's kind of faster than you'd want, then that will kick in, I guess is the best way to say it. That's kind of the way it will unfold. So not to worry about that at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Emily.
Hello, Dr. John. Hello,
Hey.
everyone. I really just feel to ask some more about the cetaceans, and whether you can offer any more insights in how they're working with us, and because I feel them so present during healings often, and I had the beautiful experience of swimming with humpback whales recently, which was just amazing.
Lucky you.
But I just feel them around so so often in healings, and wondered, yeah, what other insights you might give us about their presence.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Thanks, Em. So the cetaceans are, there are mammary species on the planet that have a very special role to play in life on the planet in general, and particularly from an energetic dimensional perspective. And so the whales and the dolphins are beings that are strongly in that category. The dolphins have a multi-dimensional reality that they live in that is similar to the way humans live, but they're more aware of it than humans are. And so the dolphins have all kinds of attributes and abilities to work with what looks like sonar, like it's sound and vibrational frequencies and these kinds of things. But it's really at a level of energetic organization for things to materialize into the world form. And so the dolphins can make sounds, for example, that create crystalline templates that become the foundational structure of energy for things to then begin materializing in the world in the 3D way. And so just like a human being can think and create and then bring things into form, like from a thought process or from an interdimensional plane, all the healing work we do is of that nature. We're going into a space with another human being. We're opening to this quantum realm of energy. We're channeling in energy and information to help the person make transitions in the energy while they're here. You can see the interdimensionality of that. You can see the multi-dimensional nature of what that kind of healing is really all about. And here we are as our, little 3D beings just doing our work and, doing healing sessions and stuff. But in this whole other multi-dimensional way, all of these magical things are also happening. And so dolphins have this ability, and they're part of the structure of the planet, the whole of the Earth's as a creational structure, if you will. And they're critical in creating these sonar patterns that really crystallize energy in very specific ways. So they have a beautiful role to play in the ascension because all of that crystalline energy is being restructured. Like everything we see on the world comes into being because it exists in an energy state. And so the human body has an etheric body that allows it to kind of turn into a physical body. And it's the intelligence and the energy that governs that. But it's true of everything that exists in the planet. And as we shift from this duality energy into this unity energy, all of the crystalline nature of the planet is being restructured. There are grids of energy that are being reactivated. There are energy patterns that are being catalyzed that are new. They weren't even, like, for example, you'll see people talking about catalyzing the pyramid energy between Egypt and the pyramids in the Yucatan and in Asia and all the other parts of the world. There are the pyramidal structures. And there's consciousness emerging that there was once a crystalline grid that connected all of these pyramids together. That's absolutely true. It was. And it was kind of shut down while we went through the duality energy. All of that is coming back online, but there's a whole other layers of energy that are also being integrated into the crystalline structure of the planet. So it's all happening energetically before it outpictures materially. And so the dolphins really play a big role in that, the whales as well. And so the whales have a little bit of a different role than the cetaceans in the sense that the whales carry the full Akashic library of the planet, but their sounds are also fundamental in the grid that holds the world in place. And so when a whale sings in the ocean, it can be heard on the other side of the ocean, not to us with our little ears, but whales hear whales. And so, they'll hear it thousands of miles away through the ocean. And so you just kind of recognize the power of that sound, the power of those creations. And so you can kind of see how it works in a really big scale kind of a way. And they carry the big bodies to do that by being whales. You know, they have the energetic presence, the power to sing out that sound in the water milieu to create the crystalline patterning. And so the dolphins play a role in that. So you kind of think of like the whale would make the Christmas tree and the dolphins would decorate it. They would bring all the beauty that would add to the foundational structure that exists. So spending time, having that understanding, I think, is really precious and fundamental to understanding the role they play in the ascension. And people can learn to communicate with the whales and the dolphins. People have really profound healing experiences with the whales and the dolphin. Every time you spend time with them, you really are transformed. I had an experience where I went back to the area where I was born in Canada. It's on the East Coast in Newfoundland. I was born on a little island off the main island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And I didn't even know as an adult that whales go there every year. Like, I thought, it didn't even dawn on me. And I was born in June, so it was their season to be there. And I was told by this lady who was giving me a reading, she said, "What is it with the whales?" And like, I think I was in Arizona when I had the reading. And she goes, "Do you live here?" And I said, "No, I live in Canada." And she said, "Do you live by the ocean?" And I said, "Well, no, not at present, but I used to." And she said, "The whales are like, they were there when you were born. They were there all around you. And they knew that they were working with you." And so I thought, okay. So I just kind of like registered as an experience. I didn't have any personal memory of it or experience. So I was talking to my aunt about a week later, and she said, "They're going on a whale watching tour." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "There's whales." She said, "There's so many humpbacks." She said, "They're here all summer long." And so she said, "We love going out every year and seeing the whales." So this blew my mind because it was so unexpected. And it was kind of when I was going through my spiritual awakening and all that kind of stuff. And it just really kind of tied it all together. So I went back with my family, my brother and his kids, and we were all together. We went out on a boat to see the whales. Now, the water there is really cold, so you're not going to jump in the water with them because you'll freeze to death. It's only like 50 degrees or whatever. But we were in the boat kind of watching them. And this beautiful, beautiful female whale came right up to the boat, and she swam under the boat, and she turned around and her eyes surfaced through the water, and she hovered there and stared at all of us looking over the side of the boat. And I was having these waves of really, really divine energy just washing over me. But everybody, all my nieces and nephews and my brother, who's not really sensitive to this kind of stuff, we're all having the same experience. And all of a sudden, I knew that she was there the day I was born. I knew that she was in the harbor the day I was born. And it was the message I received as she was looking, and it just blew me away. And so in ways that we don't understand, our souls are connected to these beings, and it's all part of the ascension story, I guess, is what it kind of comes down to. It's all part of the story. But many people will feel the profundity of this connection, and they'll have these kinds of experiences. And so it's to be aware of it. It's not always that we have to do something about it other than revel in it and, really profit from every opportunity. We have to spend time with them and understand the nature of what's happening, I guess. And some people become facilitators, bringing people to be with whales and dolphins, or they do healing trips and allow people to have experiences, because working with them can be very profound and healing. And so because of the nature of their energy, because of the nature of the sound, being in the water with them can bring really powerful healings to people in different ways. So some people are also led and guided to do that kind of work specifically with the dolphins. And so many layers to the answer. But I don't share that personal story too often, but I share it with you guys because I think it's apropos for what we're talking about. And they're really part of what we're doing here too. So, as you know. Thanks. Jinsim.
Hi again. I'm just really curious, listening to you talk about kids. So my daughter, friend's daughter, they draw nothing but dragons. They're very connected to dragons. I'm just wondering why.
Okay.
And I know recently too, in my Unity Field Healing sessions, initially I'll try to call the dolphins, whales to come, but I didn't feel any connection to them.
Uh-huh.
So I called the dragons, and I know two came.
Look out.
What is it with dragons?
So the dragon consciousness is the way I would describe. The dragon consciousness is reemerging. And so people are also beginning to understand the profound connection that humanity and the earth holds to the dragon consciousness. So the dragon beings are elemental forces, I guess is the best way to say it. There's the dragons embody really deep, profound elemental energies, and they can really pervade. So, you have your fire breathing dragons, you have water dragons, you have air dragons, you have all other kinds of dragons as well. The dragons are elemental. They're mystical because they don't typically appear in physical form. They exist in etheric realms of consciousness. So like unicorns or dragons, they're mythical creatures. And in when we speak of power animals and things, there's often a physical animal that correlates to the consciousness, like the eagle is a physical bird, but the eagle in consciousness and in shamanic work is a little bit different than just the physical bird. It's a whole principle of consciousness. And so the dragons will bring power and energy that can be utilized or harnessed, not harnessed, that sounds like it's a controlling word, but utilized in understanding that they can bring energy to bring forward healing experiences. And they're surfacing on the planet right now for benevolence. They're coming back into consciousness because they're with us energetically to help move the energy of the planet forward. Very similar to the way we were just talking about with the whales and the dolphins. And so a lot of people feel an intimate connection to the dragons. I was born under the Chinese astrology of a dragon, so it's always kind of been special to me to know that. But it didn't enter too much into my consciousness until I had a visit from one in a meditation. And this beautiful dragon came. She was like a blue, green, aqua kind of a color. And she had a beautiful radiant eye. And she kind of came down and I could just see her face in profile and I could see her eye. And I understood that she embodied the perfect balance of earth and water. It was like in her energy, she was the perfection of the balance of earth and water. And so I could see the nature of her and the energy that she carried and how, of course, that would tie into healing work and all that kind of stuff. And so it was the first introduction I ever had personally to a dragon energy. Because before that, I wasn't even sure if it was true because I had never had a personal experience with it myself. And so I came to realize that it was, it's profound, it's true. And that's my understanding of what's happening. Like people are remembering. And so when we see really highly advanced spiritual beings like, bodhisattvas and Kuan Yin, for example, she stands on a dragon. And so a dragon is the Kundalini force. It's the spiritual force that flows from the spiritual realm into the physical world to bring energy into the planet. And so that's my understanding, very basic, but that's my understanding of the dragons. I'm new to the dragon world. Well, at least in this lifetime.
Thank you. So the children are connecting to.
Totally. Yeah. It's
okay.
everywhere. You see it. And it's important to really just play with it and honor it, not to, because the dragon can also, like, there's so much of this mythical stuff about slaying the dragon and overcoming evil and all that kind of stuff. But that's not the essence of the dragons at all.
No, all they do is draw to keep drawing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And let them do it, because what they're doing is they're connecting with the energy as they draw. Like the drawing is a materialization. They're bringing a pattern into form. So it's because they're connected to it that they're drawing it. So it's kind of like an interdimensional thing that they're doing. So
Wow.
just let them do it and,
Oh,
and
yeah.
celebrate, love them, and tell them how beautiful their pictures are.
I do, because I can't draw. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Alrighty. Hey, how are you? Yes, come on.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm Maria. I'm
Hi.
sorry about it says iPad
I was going to
there,
say,
and
I know your name is not
haven't had,
iPad.
no, no,
How are you,
it's Maria. Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't had it very long, so it's not, I didn't shift
No
anything
worries
over.
at all. No worries. No
So
worries.
anyway, okay, so question I just had come to me. I work with Pragit and Jules, the Stargate
Okay.
group.
Yeah.
I'm huge in there. I'm loving it. So I'm just curious now that because I didn't want to mix anything, I wasn't sure if I could. But now we're talking about maybe bringing in dragon energy, or you can bring it, have there are other angels and whatnot. Is it okay if I was to actually work within the Stargate, or should I just leave that separate?
There would be no problem in doing that whatsoever. So the Stargate, the way I've had meditations with Pragit and Jules, and their meditations are really beautiful, and the Stargate is really a profound healing influence. It's very close in consciousness to unity field healing work as well. Like, it's interesting how these things are all kind of cryon connected, like they all have a connection through cryon as well.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so a lot of practitioners have done work with the Stargate, or they work with etheric Stargates and those kinds of things, or they do the meditations that they have too. If you have a Stargate, I was going to say, if you're working with the Stargate energy, it would be something that's in your space anyway. So if you're working,
I was just going to say that because I have my home Stargate that I, keep activated daily.
Yeah.
And in my room here where I work, it's activated, and they say it'll always be activated. Now that I say that, it makes sense.
Yeah,
of course,
exactly.
it will be here already.
100%.
Right.
100%. Yeah. And so it'll be part of the work you're doing for sure. So there's no worries about that. It's a very natural synthesis. Like, it's something that will happen spontaneously, or just in a very natural way. So there's no issue with that whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great.
Excellent.
Thanks. That's it, I think, for now for me.
For now.
And hi, everybody.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm just starting up again too myself. I took the course back in 2020 December, and I've been working a lot with Pragit and Jules and this, and my timing. I think, and I'm good now. I'm just starting up, and I've got a few clients lined up for January and whatnot. I'm really excited.
Watch out, 2023 is a big year.
Yeah. Oh, well,
the timing is very right. So actually, let's talk a little bit about that for a minute, because I think it's something that's really helpful to kind of address. So 2023 is going to be a very interesting year. And when the Syrians give an annual kind of a message, and they do this usually in the fall of the year, and it's always published in the Sedona Journal. It's the only time I really submit anything to the journal. And but they always come and give a very specific message for the energy of the year to come. And so in 2022, they said it's going to feel like there's a splitting of timelines. And they said it's not exactly that way. There's only a timeline. There's only one timeline for the future of the earth. And we've gone on to this new timeline, and that's where we're going. Now, the energy of how that all materializes and all that kind of stuff is contingent on all kinds of factors and forces, but that is the timeline of the planet. But because it's gone in that orientation, the energy of the old timeline, the old Earth, is going to feel like it's fading away. And this is kind of like a fracture point. It's going to feel like a year where the old and the new become so transparent, and it's going to feel like one is letting go. And I think if you look at the year 2022 and like the last COVID part of the crises and all the changes on the planet and all the political strife and all the things that are part of our life these days, you can see how there's a consciousness fractioning. It's like there's new and there's old, and they are so transparent. And if you're kind of aligned to the new, the old is even more transparent, I think, to you looking at it. So you kind of see it for what it is. Now, they said this year is going to feel like it's like you're walking in a kaleidoscope. And I thought, what a strange imagery. But they said, just imagine yourself on a road and you're walking down the road and there's all these things flying past you, like light of all kinds of different colors and shards. And like, it's literally like you're walking through a kaleidoscope. But you're really centered. You're going to feel like you're on a road and this is all happening around you. And you're just kind of watching it all happen as you look around. You're going to feel centered in yourself, but in a world of change. And I thought, what a beautiful analogy to give, because you can see how as we go forward in this energy, that's exactly what's going to happen. Like there's so much going to be transforming in the world around us. There's revelations, there's legal things, there's collapses of structures, there's combats of energies of different kinds. There's so many things going on. And it's all like flying past and changing. And they said it's kind of like these are shards of consciousness, like their energy, they carry an energy, but there's like shards of consciousness and they're all just like moving past you and you're going to feel very centered in the experience. But it's not going to be a year of like fluffy grace. It's going to be a year where you feel really centered and aligned, but the world around you is changing all the time and rapidly. And I thought it's so comforting to hear that, because that's kind of how the world feels, isn't it? Like right now, it feels like it's all changing. Nobody knows where it's going. It feels crazy on some days, and if not all days. And you kind of look around and you see the world falling apart in one way, and yet you know something really magical and beautiful is happening at the same time. But we don't always feel that magic and beauty. It feels more like we're in the collapse phase rather than in the beauty phase, if at least in my mind. Does that make sense to everybody? Can you resonate? And so that's kind of what's happening in the world. Now, as we move through 23, 24, 25, the energy is going to shift in such a way that that's all going to be changing. And by the time we get later, like 25, 26, we're really going to feel ourselves in a new place. And by 27, it's going to really feel anchored. We're going to really feel like now we're building the new world, as opposed to like breaking down the old one still. So this year is a year of tremendous change. And I just want to highlight and share that with you. I also did a meditation. It's called Aligning with the Energies of 2023. And so if you go to the website, it's there. Tracy can pop a link in the email too that you send out with the recording, if you wouldn't mind. And to the meditation. So it's a nice meditation to kind of align yourself to the energy of that shift, the 2023 shift. As we go into the holiday season and the year 2023, it's kind of nice to attune to the energy of that change. I just kind of want to lay that out there so you kind of understand the umbrella of the energy of what's happening right now, and that you find your center and you do everything you need to do to be in your center. Just let things change around you, let it all happen, and stay in that center place in your heart, and just keep putting one foot down in front of the other and doing all the things you know you need to do to be well in yourself, and to see the nature of that happening so that it doesn't add stress or confusion or get you caught up in it. You just kind of see it all for what it is, and you stay centered in your own well-being. Okay. And that is my Christmas message to you. All right, guys. So I think we'll wind it down there. Do you find the QA sessions good? Do you find them really helpful? Are you loving them? I do. I am. Good. Okay. So we'll do these periodically, and we'll always have recordings. So if you do miss out, we'll make the recordings available and stuff too. Tracy, do you want to say a little something before we close down?
I'm good for now. Actually, I just want to put a plug in there. because it's been coming through really, really loud. So I did make a 2023 bracelet. And if people are interested, I'll put the link in the email. You can click on it if you like or not, but it's just something that's been really shouting at me for the last month. And so in the last week, I put it all together, and the energies are it's so interesting that we were talking about the cetaceans and the dragons, because those two energies are in the bracelet.
There
So
you go.
yeah, no coincidences, eh?
There are none.
So yeah, I just want to let you know about that. And I can't wait to be with everyone again on Thursday. So it's like we're in this whole week of Syrian grace and light. So and thank you to each and every one of you for being here today and sharing your light and all your questions and just everything. So thank you.
Thanks, Trace. Thank you. So, my dear friends, for those who are doing the transmissions, we'll see you Thursday online. And if not, I want to wish you a beautiful holiday season from the top and the bottom of my heart. I hope you have a beautiful time with your friends, your family, your communities, and know that you're very loved. I love each and every one of you very, very much. So I just want to send out a big wave of love and look forward to connecting again soon. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much, Fran.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.